Hello, friends, and welcome to this sermon for Christ the King Sunday. The text is Matthew 25, 31 to 46. So if you'd like to quickly have a look at that before I preach, you can just pause and go read the lesson. Matthew 25, 31 to 46. Well, thank you for joining me. In the end, Jesus will reign in love. And anything that gets in the way of that will be gone forever. That is the good news on Christ the King Sunday. On this last Sunday of the church year, we always look ahead to the end of all things. We look forward in hope to an end that is nothing but love, harmony, and peace. Everything else besides love, harmony, peace, and justice, everything else is provisional. It will come to an end. Human beings judging one another will come to an end. Racism will come to an end. Suffering will come to an end. Poverty and hunger will come to an end. Violence and death will come to an end. This pandemic and its isolation will come to an end. These things are not eternal. Only love is eternal. Christ the King Sunday, or perhaps Reign of Christ Sunday, is a relatively new festival in the church year. It was instituted by Pope Pius XI in 1925, specifically in response to rising nationalism. It was in 1925, for example, that Mussolini dissolved the Italian parliament and declared himself dictator. It was the same year that Hitler resurrected the Nazi Party in Germany. In the United States, membership in the Ku Klux Klan was at an all-time high in 1925. Christ the King Sunday was Pius's way of reframing what is truly important by refocusing on Jesus' emphasis of service and love of neighbor, and his work ultimately to reconcile and bind together all things and all peoples in a great love. Well, 95 years later, we obviously still need Reign of Christ Sunday. Now, the chosen gospel reading for Christ the King Sunday was maybe not an obvious one. You'd think maybe the people who put together the lectionary might pick a reading showing Jesus' majesty, or perhaps something from the book of Revelation with Jesus decked out in a fancy robe and a jeweled crown. Or maybe a gospel reading, say, with Jesus shining and radiating glory on a mountaintop like we hear on Transfiguration Sunday. But this is not what we get. This is not the picture of Jesus we get on Christ the King Sunday. The picture we get is something very, very different. And what we get is Jesus as the poor. What we get is Jesus as the hungry and the thirsty. What we get is Jesus as the imprisoned and the sick. What we get is Jesus as the stranger. And those who have served Jesus in this life, it will be revealed, are those who have served the very least of these, my brothers and sisters, says Jesus. This is the Jesus we get on Christ the King Sunday. Now, I've said many times that we must accept God for who God is and not simply turn God into who we want God to be. In our own human relationships, that is disastrous, trying to turn somebody into something they're not, or thinking of somebody as somebody they're not. And it's also disastrous in religion. But it is who God is, Jesus, the poor, the thirsty, the hungry, sick. That is who God is. And if we want a relationship with Jesus, that relationship will only come in our relationship with the poor, the hungry, the sick, and the stranger. This is Jesus' message to us on Christ the King Sunday. And we wish to serve this Jesus. We serve the hungry, the sick, the poor, and the stranger. As Jesus reveals today, that is where we can find him, and that is where we can serve him. Now, I was reminded this week of a famous sculpture unveiled in Toronto In 2013, it is called Homeless Jesus, and it was made by the sculptor Timothy Schmaltz. It was inspired by this passage in Matthew, and it shows Jesus as a homeless person sleeping on a park bench. I've got a picture of it here in the text of the sermon, so if you want to see a good picture of it, you can open the text of the sermon. It's just embedded in the body of the text. I'll try and show you a picture on my screen here. So there it is. In all respects, it looks like someone with no home sleeping in a public place. Well, did Jesus not say elsewhere in Matthew's Gospel, "Foxes have beds and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head"? In the sculpture, Jesus is huddled beneath a blanket that covers his face and his hands, and in fact, the only way to identify the figure as Jesus is to see the marks of crucifixion on his feet. This is the resurrected Jesus, still bearing the marks of the nails. Now, the sculpture is both loved and hated. Some can't stand it and find it offensive, while the Pope has blessed it. Still, it is undeniable that Jesus, in the clearest possible language today, simply says, "That is where I am." In the story in Matthew's Gospel, the goats are those who choose to do nothing for the hungry, the poor, the sick, and the stranger. Jesus seems to be saying that doing nothing is never an option for a Christian. Indeed, they are surprised to learn where the risen Jesus is. The sheep, on the other hand, who are welcomed into the divine presence, are also surprised. They are very surprised to learn that when they serve the hungry, the poor, the sick, and the stranger, they're surprised to learn that when they were doing those things, they were serving Jesus. So they weren't doing it to get into heaven. They weren't doing it to get into the divine good books. They were doing it because it needed to be done. They simply did it because their neighbors were in need. They were doing it out of love and out of a deep compassion. So it turns out that there is somewhere, after all, right here and right now, where Christ is reigning in love. Christ is reigning in love in all of these down-to-earth acts of compassion and love, in these many, many different acts of compassion and love that take place every day. Where love is, God is. Now, in the end, the promise of Christ the King Sunday is that everything and all people will be bound together in the love of God. But even here, even now, some things and some people are bound together in love, and that is where Jesus and his love are reigning. One day, in Calcutta's massive train station, Mother Teresa found an elderly man lying unconscious. He had wounds that were infected and badly needed care, although it was very unclear how much longer he would live. Teresa took him home with her, where she cleaned his wounds, prayed with him, and just sit with him and hold his hands. He regained consciousness just long enough to say thank you before he died. Later that evening, as she was debriefing her day with the other Sisters of Mercy, she said, "I had the privilege today of caring for the wounded, dying Christ." In the end, what separates the sheep from the goats isn't what they believed or what church they belonged to. What separated the sheep from the goats was simply compassion. Each of us, if we're honest, is part sheep and part goat, to be sure. None of us is perfect. Certainly none of us is perfectly compassionate. And every single one of us makes mistakes in expressing that compassion. Sometimes we do things we shouldn't, and sometimes we neglect to do the things that we should. But slowly, Jesus and his love are transforming us into our best selves. Slowly, Jesus is loving us into loveliness. Slowly, we are becoming compassion. For some of us, we get impatient and that transformation is not happening fast enough. We all fail, but I'm here to remind you to be patient, to exercise endurance, and exercise compassion on yourself as well. Well, I hope when you look at First Lutheran Church, you see a place where Jesus and his love and compassion are reigning even now. First Lutheran Church is not perfect, and I am certainly not perfect. We have strengths and weaknesses like any other community, but let us be gentle with one another and keep moving forward in grace and in love. For us as staff, I know it is a great privilege to have our building situated where it is. Nearly every day we receive a phone call from Jesus or a knock at the door from Jesus, asking us politely if we have any food to share. Not everyone has that same privilege, but as members of First Lutheran Church, we do. We have the opportunity to serve Jesus every day, and surely that is a great thing and something to be grateful for. Compassion is reigning here, even at Sargent and Victor, a station on the way to the end of all things, a station on the way to the good end of all things. We minister with our feet on the ground, even as we look forward in hope to a great day when all things, and not just a few things, are bound together in a great love. We look forward to that day with Julian of Norwich, who so long ago had a very hopeful vision of the future in the midst of very troubled times, just like we're in now. This is what she saw. In the end, all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of all things will be well, and we shall see it. So on this last Sunday of the church year, we look forward in hope to that end that is nothing but love and harmony and peace and justice. Everything else is provisional. Suffering will come to an end. Human beings judging one another will come to an end. Racism will come to an end. Poverty and hunger will come to an end. Violence and death will come to an end. This pandemic and its awful isolation will come to an end. These things are not eternal. Only love is eternal. Only compassion is eternal. Long may it reign. Amen. Thank you for joining me, friends. I wish you every blessing in this difficult time. Please share your feedback with us on this video or any others. Leave a comment or email us or text or phone. Next week, we begin a new week of the church year. And that is something to look forward to. There's a promise in new beginnings. So let us be hopeful. Let us endure. Let us love one another. Until next time, bye-bye.